Good morning, everyone. We're live for a recording of Living Free in Tennessee's podcast. It's the Monday podcast. I usually go a little bit later in the day, but I wanted to get this audio file to Pranav, who's helping me produce it. He's part of the reason why I'm able to get episodes out on Saturday and Sunday when I do a lot more concentrated homestead work on the weekends or preparing for some of these events we do, like the food forest event that's coming up at the end of this month. We're doing a really cool thing here. We're installing a food forest, and I decided this was the year for it because of it took me 5 years of implementing a big picture permaculture plan on my homestead because I had done homesteading from just a homesteading standpoint without knowledge of permaculture. I think 8 years ago, I started realizing what permaculture was, and then I was just overwhelmed with all of the information. And I finally paid Nick Ferguson to come in. I've had 3 permaculture advisors come to the property to give me some help in figuring out the plan here, because it's easier to look at somebody else's property that you're not emotionally attached to and come up with a plan than it is to do your own, in my experience. So the deal here was that one of the things I'm best at is teaching. And I wanted to turn this property into both a model of a learning place and a place where we can do events and teach people hands-on, as well as help them start their businesses and all of those things. In order to do that, I had to take a property that was not all lined out with event infrastructure, shelter, showers, outhouses, like all that stuff that you need for events, camping. And I had to put that into a cohesive plan while also keeping my mind towards I'm a homesteader and I want to have production off my property, but I also work really hard. So I don't have a lot of time to be out cultivating all the time. I would love to do more of that. I love to preserve food. Hi, everybody on the live feed. But it took 5 years of getting the event piece really like nailed in and wired in. And even that will have a few changes. But like the big stuff is done now, both from a raising capital standpoint and implementation standpoint. And then I knew I wanted a food forest or more perennial sorts of things off this property, so it's feeding itself and there's a cycle. Didn't know where to put it. Once the event stuff was done, it became a lot more clear. Now, my advisors already had in mind where they thought it would go, but I needed to see it. And finally this year I saw it. So I thought, well, the best time of year to install a food forest here is in the fall. And in October, I turn 50. That's this month. And so I will, instead of doing anything crazy, like have a big party, I mean, we're having a party, I will do this class, which will cost me more than we get from selling tickets. But anybody who wants to see a food forest installation from beginning to end can come here the 28th and 29th. I'm limiting it to 20 total students. I have 12 students right now. So if you still want a ticket, that's at livingfreeintennessee.com, or the show. Like there's a link in the notes of this show if you want to come to that class. But people can see not only how to do it hands-on, they can see why we are not putting swales in and why the earthworks is a little bit different on my property than other places where because a lot of people put a food forest in and there's a swale installation with it. That's not happening here. We are going to do some micro swales. We'll explain why and what's going to happen to those over time. Good morning, Andrea. Good morning, Martinson family, Chuck Peoples, Derek, Lamar, Janet, Letty. Great to see you guys on. If you end up having questions along the way of this show, just put them in all caps. But we decided to do that because I know so many people have a little trouble wrapping their head around the concept of food forest. Some people should be putting orchards in. That's our interview Sunday with Nick was talking about, like, if you're doing production peaches or something, you're putting in an orchard. It's obviously an orchard. It's more intensive management. But if you're Nicole Sauce and you run a coffee business and Self-Reliance Festival and my podcast, which is basically 3 businesses, right? And a homestead, 4 businesses, you may not have a lot of time to run an orchard. And I get a lot more just for personal production in the homestead off of the livestock, because I have a tendency to eat only meat and vegetables and not a lot of carbs, than I do off of fruit that I don't really eat much of. but the animals eat fruit. And so we are putting some fruit in, and I like cherries and plums, and I like those things in season. And eventually I want it to be a beautiful place here too, because anybody who's visited the holler, you see the potential, but it's also a little rough here. And over time, part of this plan is to make it more beautiful for me. And, and it's funny because when we work on these projects, they'll be like, hey, here's the ugly way to do it. And I'm like, so it's going to cost more to do the beautiful way. And I want the beautiful way because I want to come out here with my coffee and sit on my rock wall and look at my plants. Like I got a banana tree up there I'm looking at right now. It hasn't liked the last little frost, but we've been, mulching that in for the winter. Anyway, all of that is happening. And this year has been a pretty big shift business-wise for me. So this episode that we're about to record is a debrief of Self-Reliance Festival, but I'm also going to catch you up on the last 6 years of transitioning from a corporate job that paid six figures to what I'm doing now and what that really looks like for me financially. Because I don't want to hide how hard it is to get things going. People follow my story because I transitioned out of this job and I do this homesteading and I have all these skills I can teach, but I also look successful from the outside and I feel successful. What I am not is making $1 million a year. And I think some people underestimate how frugally I live sometimes and what it has taken to make my businesses start being successful. It's taken a huge investment of time and a lot of reinvestment of any profit that comes in. And that is my reality. I know people who have a different reality when they start their businesses where within a year they've got $500,000 positive cash flow. I know somebody has $100,000 positive cash flow. I think it's off goat yoga or something. Like they did it and it worked and their expenses are low and that's awesome. That's not how coffee is. And this is not complaining. It's just, I want to share my experiences with you all. So we're going to go into that today. A lot of this is debrief about what it's taken to get Self-Reliance Festival up over the last year. With that, we'll do this like we usually do. I'll do a 5-second pause and then we'll launch into the podcast. Those of you in the live feed, if you have questions or comments, Derek's turning 52, a fellow 50-year. So we were all born in 72. It's so funny. Somebody in my county has their 50th wedding anniversary and her anniversary is on my birthday. So I was born the day she got married. I thought that was, I didn't tell her that because like, it's more important to focus on the congratulations of the wedding. I mean, like 50 years, that's an accomplishment to stay with the same person, no matter how annoying they get. I just say that because I can be an annoying partner, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, Carrie, good. You're listening while working. So we'll do the 5-second pause. We will record the podcast. There'll be another 5-second pause. I will take questions. If I see your question while I'm going, or it's germane to the topic and it fits, because there's usually like a 30-second delay or so between what you say and what I said, I'll work it into the podcast. If not, I'll stay on as long as you want me to. I'm getting this done early so Pranav can produce it today and we get it out because I know he wants to do that. In fact, I should share my show notes with him so he has them, so he can start working on the graphics while I'm recording this podcast. I'm just going to say today's show notes. All right, you guys ready? You're ready, right? All right, here's the pause. Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, October 10th, 2022. This is episode 633 of Living Free in Tennessee. And this is the episode Janet was looking for last week when I came off of the Self-Reliance Festival. It's the debrief episode. That's right. We're going to talk about Self-Reliance Festival, but I'm going to debrief more than that today. I'm going to debrief the last 6 years of building Living Free in Tennessee, of building Hollow Roast Coffee, and of transitioning into more of a training center than what I was doing before, which was websites and marketing and helping free market public policy campaigns get passed at the state level, right? So it's been a big change for me over the last 6 years, and y'all have been along for the journey. Many of you since the beginning, which is amazing. It's always amazing when I hear somebody who's like, yeah, I came in at episode 8. Episode 8 was a big episode for me. Episode 8 was my squash episode. And a lot of people came in at the squash episode and then have stayed with me ever since then. So I actually put a lot of my success towards squash, and that's actually fitting this year because now we have a lot of squash. I just, with the first frost of the year, we have so much, there's squash all over my house. I don't even know where to store it. I now have it separated by what will store long and what needs to be used soon. Because, the less ripe squash, because I have Tromboncino, it's softer and it's not going to store. So that stuff is like, eat it first, but then I'm sort of a ketogenic eater and that has high carbs. So I'm, we got to balance the squash, but there's been a little bit of squash, just a little bit of squash. In everything. Carrie on live stream says, I found LFTN in episode 20. See, people have been with me for a long time. And the cool thing about that is I've gotten to know you in person. Those of you who've been here for a long time and come to events. And that has grown into a network of people who help each other during hard times, during good times, people who help me, people I can help. And it has been great to see that ecosystem develop. So after a week of just post Self-Reliance Festival assessment, I thought today would be a good day for the debrief episode. I am sure there is stuff I'm missing. I haven't heard from everybody. We haven't sent a survey out after the event. We probably will. And we haven't sent like the post-event email to all the attendees saying this is how we're moving forward, just because I'm still checking dates with some people who wanted to not have conflict with our event. But I'm going to share the good. I'm going to share the bad. I'm going to share some ugly. And I'm going to talk to you about the money because we made some money this time. First time. Last time I thought we made money and then other expenses came in. But we made money this time. And to me, that's a turning point for the event. I find it important to have a profit feedback loop for things to see how we're doing. And I used to run a nonprofit in the public policy arena. And one of the biggest problems with my nonprofit was that I was dependent on donations. And then I had to convince people to accept the services, and they were services people should have been paying for. So it established bad habits with the customers I helped with their marketing to think that marketing should be free. And when I realized that was one of my like big moments of, if you're not willing, even as a nonprofit, to invest in furthering the success of your organization by paying for services that should be paid for, that's a big problem. And if I'm running a company that doesn't have that feedback loop, I'm enabling bad behavior. We may not be doing what we really should be doing for the organization. And it's like double the work for what could be half the work, because raising money from donors is a full-time job. And then giving services to the organizations who apply for them is a full-time job. And that second piece that first piece didn't necessarily need to be there when I could have just been writing proposals for and executing contracts for nonprofit organizations that we served. So I'm actually super excited that in only a year, Self-Reliance Festival has made a profit for the first time. And that's awesome. So thanks, guys, for helping us with that. Live streams this week. So we have 3 live streams this week, 4 actually, including this one. But tomorrow at probably, and this is like a little squishy, it was supposed to be at 10:30. It'll probably start at 11. I'm doing a live interview. So that's for our interview show, which airs on Sunday. For the audio podcast, we will record it live on YouTube. Not every one of these records live, but if people are comfortable recording live, that's great. The reason the time is squishy is I had urgent oral surgery last week, which is why we didn't have all the podcasts last week. And I have to go back in for some tooth stuff that they're doing. And the only time they could do it was 9:30 Tuesday. I can't chew food right now. And so I really want to chew food soon. And so I'm going in, and I told the person, if that 9:30 appointment takes too long, then we will be starting a little bit late. He was kind enough to be flexible in his time. We have a Wednesday live with John Willis and another guest that I have not confirmed, but I'm going to say it, but don't quote me on this, because if this doesn't happen, it'll be somebody else. But I believe Paul Wheaton will be on the Wednesday live with John Willis, and I will have all of the information about that later today. He said probably, but he has some conflicts. He has to move around to make that work. If that works, he's also launching a Kickstarter this week. So we'll have all sorts of fun stuff. I don't know if you've ever watched an interview with Paul Wheaton, but that dude's high energy. So I'm excited about that. If that doesn't happen, we'll have him later this month. And then, of course, at 9:30 on Friday, we'll have the Friday Homestead happenings and followed by the Q&A. If you're listening to the podcast on audio and you don't ever come to the live streams and you want to get a question in for that Q&A show, email me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, or go over to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact. Those emails come to me and I answer questions after the Friday show as long as I come and as I can. And then those are turned into the Saturday podcast. All right, with that, it's time for the first segment of today's show. That's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This segment's been around the almost the entire length of the podcast. Like I did my first, so this is kind of a debrief show. This segment is about storing what you use and using what you store. And when I first started the podcast, I mean, I didn't really know anything about podcasting or organizing podcasting. And what started happening is I realized I'm kind of talking about some of the same topics every day. And so I gave them names. And Tales from the Prepper Pantry has been there from the beginning. It's one of my most popular segments. So what's happening in the pantry right now, for those of you who are kind of new to deep pantry storage, is we on the Homestead, we're going from putting things in the pantry to using things from the pantry. So I'm already starting to use the canned goods that I put up over the summer. Usually I get into November before I do that, but because we had our first frost, I'm no longer growing green beans, tomatoes, or peppers. That's not entirely true. Under Taj Mahal, there's a microclimate where my peppers aren't dead yet, but the ones that were up in the garden are done. So when I make a soup or a stew, I either pull the green parts of that from the freezer or I pull it from canned goods. So we are into a use up transition. This means I'm putting some of my canning stuff away into long-term storage, longer so it's not in my way in the kitchen, and bringing things out for using, like cooking this stuff from longer term storage because I wasn't needing it. So it's just a big old, everything's moving everywhere right now. And outside under my carport, you can tell because I'm like, this goes here, but I stage it and I haven't put everything all the way away. So there's just this churn that happens in the spring and in the fall. We're in the fall churn right now. We also had to quickly accelerate the winter is coming stuff and get the squash organized. So we ended up with tons of winter squash because the pigs planted it in the pig pasture. That's butternut squash, older tromboncino squash, and cushaw squash. Those are the three kinds we have. But I keep seeds here, and some of them have cross-pollinated. So I have cumboncino, cushaw with tromboncino mixed. Bonus of Taj Mahal or seasons. Yeah, the bonus of Taj Mahal is that we have a season extension there where the frost doesn't hit the stuff under. I still have some tomatoes under Taj Mahal that we'll see how they do. But I have a tromboncino cushaw mix that's delicious. It tastes like butternut squash, but it's all sorts of funky shapes and colors. The tromboncinos that are younger are softer because they start as sort of a zucchini sort of texture and they move to a winter squash texture. So the softer ones are all like piled up on my dining room table right now. I have the ones that are harder and cured in boxes that will go into the prepper pantry for longer term storage. And then I assess those once a week to see if they're starting to get soft at all and use the soft ones up first. We feed them to the pigs. Like they get used in all sorts of ways, but I am either going to give away, cut up and use, or can, and I won't can the soft squash. So take that off the list. The softer squash as we go into the fall, because they're going to last, weeks to a month versus several months in cold storage. My cold storage does not go below freezing, but my prepper pantry is built into the ground. So it sort of functions like a root cellar at this time of year. In the summer, it gets hot and I haven't installed any way to ventilate or cool that. So I tend to put the root cellar storage in the cooler parts of my house until this time of year. So that's all part of the churn that happens. The freeze dryer is back. This summer was so hot and my freeze dryer is outside, which is great, or it's in the prepper pantry, which is great because it stays cooler there, except for not in the summer. So when it gets above about 85, 90 degrees, I'm not running that thing because it's not good for the freeze dryer. It takes forever to do the loads. And so I just decommission it. Last year, it was just for the month of August and we were cooling down at night enough that worked. This year we had a hot year. So the freeze dryer has been ready to be back up for a few weeks, but with all of the busyness of Self-Reliance Festival, it hasn't been. So we are now, what I did was I froze surplus stuff that I wanted to freeze dry. Because on the freeze dryer, you can go pre-frozen or not frozen. So I have stuff in Ziploc baggies that I can put out flat on the trays. And I'm doing blueberries right now. And then I did a big old beef stew last night that is just using up, I'm down to the parts of the cow that we buy every year that are more involved cooking than steaks and ground. And so we have a lot of stew meat left. So I did a big old beef stew last night with squash that I need to use up, right? Not a lot of squash, like a little bit, because I'm trying to stay lower carb. And I'm going to freeze dry that in 2-cup packages for my later fall travel. I'll go down to Jack Spirko's for his event. And every so often they use a caterer. And sometimes the caterer uses soy. I'm allergic to soy. So I always have 2 or 3 bags of something with me when I travel so that if I run into the soy thing, I can just, add some boiling water, have a delicious beef stew for dinner. Done, right? So that's happening, and I'm actually really excited to get the freeze drying done. I've got milk to freeze dry. I've got eggs to freeze dry. I don't have eggs to freeze dry. That's a lie. I could have eggs to freeze dry if my chickens weren't pikers, except for their ducks. I only have 1 chicken. The ducks are pikers. They're hiding their eggs. I don't know, or they're molting, but we're not getting eggs. I actually had to go get eggs for my neighbors this week. So that's really cool. And then this, like right now, between now and the food forest class, it's like iron chefing right now. We're pre-cooking everything that can be pre-cooked for the Food Forest workshop, October 28th and 29th. It's a 2-day workshop, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I do on the camping night, the night before, we do bratwurst and burgers. And then on Sunday, before everybody leaves, we just put out whatever is left over for people to grab and go. But right now, my goal with my events here, which is different than Self-Reliance Festival, is to serve as much as we have grown or locally sourced to live the life that we're preaching, right? So not just go out to Winco and buy a bunch of cheap stuff to feed y'all. I feed you homemade things from here. And what I did this weekend is I smoked 2 pork butts, and I'm pulling those for the event, and they're delicious. They are grown here. They are the pigs that we raised, and the smoker makes them taste really good. And I used a dry rub from Melissa, who is, what is it, Honeybee's Kitchen, if you are on social with us. And it is the Dark Horse rub. No, I used the Moroccan. So the Moroccan rub this time. I usually do Dark Horse. I'm probably going to do Dark Horse on the venison. So that's all done. And then the weather broke. So the oven turned off. So it's cold at night. We had our first freeze. The good thing about this is I can cold smoke bacon when we have our first freeze. So I cold smoked about 25 pounds of bacon. So I'm now looking for somebody with a slicer that I can use to slice that up for the workshop. So we'll be serving bacon that we cured here with my own recipe. I'll be doing my Grandpa Darby's breakfast sausage recipe, which requires me to grind the pork first and then mix the spices in and then make little patties. I usually do little patties. Yeah, I do handmade patties because using the press takes too long. So I might do, but I'm not going to stuff links on this one. We also have ground turkey for tacos that were raised here. I'm going to do butternut squash soup as a bisque for lunch with something else. I've got venison that I'm not sure what cuts I have or how it might be a venison stew instead of a beef stew. I'm looking at what is left of the beef. Usually we do meatloaf or meatballs, but I only have probably 6 pounds of ground left. I'm not going to buy shitty store ground and feed it to y'all. So we'll see what's left of the beef and if we can integrate some of that. I've got chickens that are going to be rotisseried. So that's all happening. And I get everything pre-cooked that makes sense to pre-cook, right? We also plan to ship in 100 oysters in the half shell from Maine. I've got that queued up because it's my 50th birthday. And on Saturday night of this event, I wanted to do something special. And I really like oysters in the half shell. I'm going to work with Andy to see if he wants to cook some of those. I was sort of waiting to decide if we were going to do that or not based on can I keep them fresh, because they will arrive on Thursday and I'm serving them Sunday. Did a bunch of research on how to keep them alive during that time and still fresh. We can do it as long as I have room in my refrigerator for it. So that's all what's happening there. And then we are having a bumper crop of chestnuts. So we have had a really, really dry year. And it's a really, really dry fall, which is really, really bad for growing grass for sheep. Also, the sheep are graduating we have 5 sheep graduating this week, and I bought a livestock trailer to move them in. And that's good because Tuesday night we're loading them up, and Wednesday morning we're going to Dunlap and getting those puppies processed. If you want to buy some, that's also at livingfreeintennessee.com. Boy, the link is not super easy to find, so I'll make that more easy to find on the homepage. But I have 2 sheep available. I've sold one. We sell them by the half or the whole. Anyway, that's all happening. But the chestnuts, how you store chestnuts. So the last few years, I've just gotten these. So chestnuts come out in these really prickly pods because I have like the Chinese chestnuts, not the American chestnut. And the American chestnut is less prickly, but it's also has that blight problem. I've had like 4 or 5 little teeny chestnuts without the nuts in these pods. This time, almost every pod is a chestnut. So I have a gallon bag already, which is more than I usually get off the one tree. And the way I store them is in Ziploc bags. I keep them from drying out. I put them in the fridge. And after it has been in the fridge for a couple of months, you can then try to plant them because they need to be kept cool for, I think, 60 days, but don't quote me on that. It might be 30. And then they turn into a tree. So I'm going to try to germinate some of these, but I also store them in that way in the fridge for use throughout the winter. And I roast them or I boil them to use them. Now, if you just store them dry room temperature, they will dry out. And when chestnuts become dry, they become hard as rocks. So it's better to keep them sort of either pre-cook them, freeze them where oxygen is not allowing them to dry out, or turn them into flour, or keep them in the fridge in a Ziploc baggie or a jar or something. It works great for me. If you let them dry out, they just become very, very like feed them to the pig hard. I guess maybe you could grind them. I don't know. I know when you make chestnut flour for use in the winter, what you do is you boil them, you peel them, you grind them, and then you dry that ground paste into the flour. You don't harden the chestnuts off first and then grind the flour. I've never made chestnut flour because I just like them. I have a chestnut like cracker, which is pretty cool. Makes a little plus cut so you don't, because if you've ever used a knife to cut chestnuts, it's very easy for that to go horribly wrong. You need to put a slit in them before you roast them, or they might explode. And you need to do the same thing before you boil them, or they might explode because the pressure builds up. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire need to have cuts in them, or you will have open little fire bombs. Don't want that. So I bought this device that it's rounded and you put it on the chestnut, and then it has a spring-loaded thing with a cross-shaped blade. You pull it up and you go boom, and it cuts. Hello, Grumpy Acres. It cuts a little plus in the chestnut, and then you don't have the explosion problem. Now, one time I didn't get it deep enough, and it did explode in my oven, but it was in my oven, and that makes a horrible mess, just for the record. So now I'm really careful. When you do that with a knife, which you totally can, be careful to keep your fingers away, because it's like you're trying to hold the chestnut and then the knife, and then if it slips, you cut your fingers. So I really like this device. Or a way, use one of those, the cutting boards that have like the juice catching ridge. You can actually put them in that ridge and they roll less, and that works well as well for cutting. If anybody else has tips on how to cut chestnuts without this special made device, that's great. I like the special made device. It's one of the single purpose kitchen utensils that I keep, because when I need it, I need it. Don't use it very often. I use it about once a year because I always make the chestnut dressing for Thanksgiving. I might do some chestnuts for the food forest class at the end of this month. We'll see. But they're delicious. I just roast them. I take them out of the shell. You need to eat them hot, or they will get hard unless you turn them into the paste and turn them into flour. And I salt them. I will have soaked them in salt water before I roast them, and then they're delicious. Carrie says long pliers can stabilize the nut while you cut the vent slice. There you go. So that's the way to do it without buying my $20 item that I have that I got on. That was me. You don't need to bark. That I got on Amazon. I was like, that's me on my desk. Cece thought somebody was knocking at the door. She was going to go into a bark fest. Okay, so that's what's up with the Prepper Pantry. Next up is the weekly shopping report. This is actually last week's report. This week's report is not up yet. Joe does this every week, and if he doesn't go shopping, we don't get it. Last week, because I did not have a Monday podcast because I got surgery, we skipped it. So I just wanted to catch you up on this. The reason we do this report is he's just been doing this since 2020 when shutdowns happened to share what it's like out in the world, what's the reality of shortages versus not shortages and pricing and all of those things. We made 2 trips this weekend. The first was on Saturday to Dollar Tree, Home Depot, and Aldi. Dollar Tree looked about the same, less frozen and refrigerated foods. The health aisle has not been restocked. The health aisle has not been restocked for 4 weeks now. Still a lot of cotton pads, Band-Aids, and some over-the-counter meds, but the selection is dwindling. One section of food coolers remains out of order, but the other sections are almost empty as well. Drink coolers still have lots of product. Canned goods are still full, although it's mostly tier 2 brands. Okay, so what this means is that we can still get corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup into fizzy water, but some of the frozen foods are not doing as well. At Home Depot, a 2x4x8 remains at $3.98. That was up to $11. I bought them at $11 when I needed them. For the first time, we both noticed less selection on the tool wall, although we did find another pair of pliers. A lot of tools are made in China, so I'd expect stocking to continue to dwindle. I was at Home Depot yesterday looking for PEX because we're bearing PEX to take my water system from pumping up the hill and needing electricity to pumping up the hill to a storage tank and then gravity feeding so that if power goes out, I have water. And then I can also tap that into my roof over time to be less dependent on power for my water long term. Okay. So while I have a ditch opening tomorrow, we're running the lines because we're showing you how we're doing this transition during the food forest class. Sean Mills will be teaching that part. I wanted to lay the pipe in before the class so we don't have to spend a whole day of the class digging a ditch and burying a ditch. I'm putting in 1-inch line from the pump house 300 feet to my house. We're using PEX Schedule A. Well, while I'm putting 1 line in, I'm putting 2 lines in. It's another $300 for that line-ish. And while this ditch is open, that's kind of expensive to put in. I'm putting, like, even though I would rather not spend $300 extra right now, I'm doing it. Why? Because it will be $300 plus $800 to pay the backhoe guy if I ever need to do that again. So then that's $8, $9 to $1,100. I can save myself that other $800 if I just put the other $300 in now. And if I never need it, whatever. But there's always something that happens. Well, at the same time, where my water's coming from is ideal for putting a geothermal system in. So geothermal cooling and heating is when you circulate water either very deep underground to cool it, or you have a water source that's cool. It's called an open system. You circulate it, and then you let it back out into a creek, for example. You put it through the equivalent of a radiator. Air goes through that. It cools the temperature with the 55-degree water. And then if you need additional cooling, you add a heat pump to that, or it heats the air that's lower if it's like 30 degrees outside with the 55-degree water. And then if you need additional heating, you heat that. That's how geothermal works. A lot of systems are closed systems. We think we can do a coil and a closed system with that spring location where my water comes from anyway, and it is a very steady source of cooling. So while I'm at it, I'm putting in 2 3/4-inch lines to run the geothermal system that we are not putting in right now. But because I have a big picture plan for energy, that's all going in. So I was at Home Depot sourcing all of that. I had to go to 3 stores, Home Depot and Lowe's, to source all that PEX because PEX is hard to find, especially Schedule A. Ouch, that hurt. So while I was there, I talked to the guy about the shortages. He's like, yeah, it's lame. Like the minute we get PEX, it's gone. Meanwhile, we can't sell all the tools we have. So that's the perspective of the Home Depot guy right now, is they have lots of tools. What that means, guys, is you may see these tools going on sale this fall if they have too much stock. So what's happened is there were supply chain disruptions because of 2020 and beyond. And now things have caught up on the production side and the demand is not there. What that means for you is your opportunity to buy, if you need something, could be right now. I got a whole new replacement wardrobe from Duluth for way less than I would have paid a year ago for some of my winter things I needed. And by me, like that's a couple shirts and some pants. It's not a lot, and a flannel, right? It's not a lot of stuff and some long underwear. But I got that all done for about half of what I would have paid a year ago because Duluth has too many things and they just happen to be in my sizes. Some of the color choices were a little loud. Like I have orange pants now, but whatever. They're pants, right? They're pants with pockets. That's what I need, like actual pockets you can put your hand all the way in, which is why I'm with Duluth. Okay, we'll get back to the shopping report now. You got a whole little divergence there. That's kind of fun. I don't remember remarkable changes at Aldi. We found what we wanted, escaping at just under $100 for the two of us plus kitties. Today, we also made 3 stops, Dollar General Market. Sonia found something she'd be looking for, and they've got Christmas stuff out already, which is indecent. Well, that's normal, though. In line, we were behind a couple of people, but I don't remember seeing more. Second was the recycle center, nothing special. Traffic was light. The final stop was a different Dollar General, where we found everything we needed. The ladder turned out to be slightly too big. So we used our tools and turned it into a 4x2 muffin set. They were looking for a muffin set. Looking through the food aisles, there are lots of holes, but we found a couple boxes of angel hair pasta for $1 each. Hopefully it's edible. Untainted regular. This means without ethanol, $4.19 a gallon. That's been hovering right around $4 for the whole time. It got up to $5 during the big old run up we had this summer. I've seen the corrupted stuff as low as $2.99. I got it for $3.09 on my way home from Self-Reliance Festival. It's up to $3.39 in this area. So that is the shopping report for the week. Next up is the frugality tip. This is where we talk about adding some frugality that makes sense into your life. If you want to get your tip in, this is mostly user generated. This one comes from me though, because it's my frugality tip this week. And I don't have any on. So Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. Please don't send them to me during instant, like over Telegram or anything, because I'll totally lose them. I lost one from Margo that way. So my frugality tip is all about using up leftovers. And I have a philosophy on leftovers that I love having them because they make my life easier. But sometimes people get sick of the same thing day after day after day. And as I mentioned last week, I had oral surgery, really can't chew yet. And that means soups or stews here. So the poor redneck has had like soups and stews every night, except for one since I got back, since I started cooking. Before I left, the thing that saved my bacon coming back from that surgery was that I had taken a carcass of a chicken I had and put an onion with it and put it in the crock pot like the night before I left. And when I got back, I had bone broth that I could drink because I couldn't feel half my mouth. And that means can't chew, because you might chew on your tongue and accidentally eat your tongue, right? Don't know. Like you could cause a lot of damage that way. So I was really happy to have the occasional cup of bone broth as I was recovering that afternoon. And then I took, because the carcass had chicken on it, I picked it the next day and made a chicken soup. Well, that means chicken soup for life around here. That's what that means. Any of you do that? Like you make a stew and then you fill your stock pot because it's a stock pot. So you might as well fill the stock pot. And then you're like, I have enough stew to feed 20 people right now. And there are 2 to 3 people eating here at any given time. Yeah. That was my chicken soup. So my frugality tip on using that up, like you can freeze it and use it later, right? But I didn't want to do that. So now today for breakfast, which is really at lunch because we have breakfast at lunch, we're having egg drop soup. So it's all about, think about how you can repurpose your leftovers to be something new to keep people eating them. If you do that, you flow through and you don't have that waste stream of food. And that's something we don't talk about a lot, but food rolls from one thing to another to another. A chicken is a cycle. You roast the chicken, you have roast chicken. The next night, I use some of the picked chicken for a pasta dish back when I did pasta. And then while that's happening, the carcass is boiling and I end up with a chicken stew or chicken dumpling stew. That is the cycle of a chicken. If you look at leftovers, there's a cycle for everything. Leftover steak on salad for lunch the next day, steak and eggs the next day, various casseroles and soups and stews. There's lots of ways to reuse your leftovers, and that keeps you from buying food for lunch the next day if you go to work, and it also keeps you from wasting things. So that is what it is. And Letty says on the live stream, I didn't know there was a way to make smaller amounts of soups and stews. There is. I used to do it in Portland, Oregon when I had a tiny kitchen, but now I don't, and I have a big stock pot. So I just kept putting beef in there yesterday. I have beef stew now too to use up. But we're having egg drop soup for breakfast, which basically I bring the chicken soup to a boil. I add sort of this hot garlic sauce I get from the Oriental grocer, and then I drop egg in while stirring, and it's delicious. And I use up eggs. I get the egg protein, and it's a little bit different than the same old bowl of chicken soup we've been having since last Thursday at this point. I think today might be the last day of the chicken. So that is the frugality tip for the week. Next up is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about, well, the State of the Union. And I promise today I'm going to talk a little bit more about how things are going. So way back when I transitioned from working a job that paid really well to doing this, I would say how much of my income was each business unit. And we haven't had one of those debriefs in a while. And the reality of what that has meant on the financial side, I have put every dollar I can back into growing my businesses as much as possible. And that means like a living wage, I was calculating at 40,000. What I've really been bringing in for me, for the household, is under 20 since that transition, including last year. And it just means that I'm more careful about decisions here. And we do get I get extra write-offs for things that help keep the budget going. I also make some money that pays bills, and I don't count this in that 20,000, right? With renting things out that then pay the mortgages. So that's how I'm able to cover the mortgages. And while that does feed into my income, the write-offs against that help with all of that. So we're looking at what I have been living on is 18 to 20,000 here. That's for health insurance and everything else. And everything I don't need goes back into growing Hollow Roast Coffee, living free in Tennessee, and building an event training center, because that's been my focused goal for 6 years since making the transition. Now, what I tried originally when I came out of that corporate world, right? Remember, I shotgunned it the first year. I was running a newspaper. I was roasting coffee. I was selling duck eggs. I was doing butchering classes. I was selling chickens because you can sell them. I was doing website development. I was doing marketing advising. I was traveling around and speaking at things. I was still doing some consulting on the side until 2020, when that got ripped out by the COVID shutdown. So I was doing 9 or 10 things, and I became known as a side hustle person. I'm like, you can drive Uber and make money and all of these things. And I really, by the end of that year, was super exhausted and had made enough money to not go bankrupt. And I had lived off of my deep pantry, and I hadn't bought toilet paper in a year, and it was great. That's part of how I lived on so little. That year I made under 15,000 at the end of the year. And I quickly looked at that and decided, you know what? I am going to have to focus. You can't just do every side hustle and make it. And so I looked at the things that I loved the most first. And that's when Hollow Roast, remember that? The first Hollow Roast Kickstarter, that totally happened. Hollow Roast is a full-time job for the first time this year. That was 5 years ago. So for 5 years, Hollow Roast was first 20%, then 30%, then 50%. And now if I did not have an employee, it would be 100%. I have an employee. The reason I have an employee is I'm doing other things, and I can't do 100% Hollow Roast and do the other things. So, that's the Hollow Roast deal. Okay. So that's why am I talking about this here? Because I want to go over Self-Reliance Festival. I'm also going to talk about the money of Self-Reliance Festival and what it has meant for Operation Independence. Self-Reliance Festival made a profit in our 4th event for the first time. The reality of the situation is I don't know how much money I've lost on Self-Reliance Festival this year, or John Willis has lost, because he paid for things he never charged me for, like porta potties. And he pays employees to be there during the event. I don't know how much that is. I don't know how much of his time is spent. And I don't know what other secret things he has done, right? We've never really sat and talked about that. What I know is the expenses are higher than what I'm tracking. Although this particular one, I was very careful about tracking expenses and time invested so that we can look at the overall event and make decisions. And I'm really proud of my team. And I'm really proud of myself, and I'm really proud of John Willis and everybody who's helped for making this event profitable for the first time. Also, if anybody's listening and can contact Tactical Redneck, Chestnut needs to go potty, and she's barking, and I can't leave this right now. Okay. Chestnut, leave it. There's lots of whining going on. Okay. So the Food Forest class, on the other hand, is going to lose money because I limited tickets to 20 and I have sold 12. We still have seats open. And I'm selling tickets through Friday this week, and then I'm not going to sell tickets anymore. Part of why that has happened is Self-Reliance Festival, because I put so much into marketing Self-Reliance Festival. I didn't sell my tickets to the food forest class, right? Chuck says Self-Reliance was the smoothest and the best. I agree. The other thing is that when we did the Plant Guild and Swale class for John, which was totally awesome, and it was a great class. There's a lot of crossover in content between my food forest class and that class. We're doing them the same year within months of each other. And some people who've taken that class are not taking my food forest class. However, I don't regret that at all. I think it was important to get that done there. I think he has a very unique property that you can learn about, right, from that. But it kind of undercut what I had been planning to do for the year for us. So I will lose money on the food forest class. I don't consider it losing money, though, because I'm investing in a food forest for my property that will pay off over time. It will be a teaching tool when people are here. I was going to put a food forest in anyway. People can learn along the way. And it's my 50th birthday, and I'm going to have some fun with some friends, right? So that is what it is. It doesn't help with Operation Independence, but it is my world. And I've chosen to be penny wise, not pound foolish. Penny wise and pound foolish on my water installation. So I'm spending another $700 on the installation to have extra lines buried, so I don't have to spend $800 every time I have those lines buried. And I think it's important to talk about that because I'm spending a little bit more on infrastructure this year than I would out of my my money I make from myself, because next year or the year after, geothermal is certainly going in here. And the cool thing is I might get a tax write-off, a 30% tax write-off for that. Like there's a whole new program that, yes, I'm an anarchist. No, I don't want to take money from the government. Yes, I will if I can. That 30% tax write-off is a big deal. That could actually help us get geothermal in here sooner. Well, getting those lines in while it's open is a big deal. So that's what's up for Operation Independence. And of course, we are selling the sheep to help offset the expenses of the sheep, which went up about $3,000 this weekend because we bought a sheep trailer, but we'll be depreciating that over the next 5 years. So that's okay. I'm actually kind of excited to have that independence because I've always had the scramble for moving animals, or we convert my trailer that y'all have seen me come to Self-Reliance Festival into a livestock trailer. The reason I didn't want to do that this time is it's very bumpy and I'm driving very far with the sheep. It's not like I'm going 5 miles. It's like I'm going 45 to 60 miles with the sheep, and that would have stressed them. And it is my opinion, when you stress the animals, they don't taste as good. So I was really looking for a livestock trailer. And finally I looked online, because last time I looked to buy one, it was like $10,000 for a livestock trailer. Well, I found two. I found one at $1,200 that needed a lot of work. And I found another one at $3,000 that didn't need a lot of work. And we bought the $3,000 one after Tactical went over the whole thing, because it doesn't need a lot of work. So now we can move them. We can store stuff in there. It's kind of like a mobile sheep unit now. So that's kind of exciting for us too. And that's a big step forward for us. Anyway, that's Operation Independence. I did want to mention our show sponsor today is Paul Wheaton. And he's launching a Kickstarter tomorrow. And that's all I can say about that. But keep your eyes peeled for that. You may be interested in what he is doing. And I'm hoping we'll have him live Wednesday, as I mentioned. And we'll talk about the Kickstarter at that time. I will probably do a pitch for him on the Wednesday show, whether or not he's on it, just on the audio podcast, because usually the beginning of the Kickstarter, he like releases a bunch of extra stuff. So if you're going to get in on his Kickstarter, that would be the time to do it. You guys ready for the main topic of the show? That's why you're here, right? I'm 48 minutes into the show. Part of why it's complicated is I'm talking about Self-Reliance Festival, but I'm talking about how I'm doing after investing 6 years into transitioning to this life. That I just had to have a leap of faith. And, you know, we talk about how you set yourself up to easily transition into this stuff. And I didn't. I jumped. The reason I jumped is I was developing health conditions, and I realized I was putting a lot of time into furthering libertarian public policy and winning, but losing more than winning. And I realized the system is rigged, and it's a rigged game, and I'm not playing. I'm not going to win. And what I could do better is take control of my own life, take ownership for my life. Andrea says, congratulations on the livestock trailer. Yep, I'm super happy about that. And help other people do the same. And the more of us who are able to choose freedom, to choose liberty, to choose independence, to live the way we want to live, no matter what other people think about it. And I don't care if that's in a New York high rise, like my friend Sue Zoldak is doing. She just announced that she and her daughter are moving to New York, or out on a homestead living very simply like I do. I don't care what you do, but you do you, right? You live the way you want to live. You make the money you want to make. You take ownership for that. And that is freedom. That's how you are positioned to say no to things that are enacted upon you when that time comes that they might be. Can you always say no? I mean, yeah, I guess sometimes it's life or death and you choose death. Sometimes you don't have that power, but you're going to have less power if you're dependent on the system than if you choose freedom and if you have set yourself up to live the way you want to live. Okay, so it's time for the debrief, and I'll bring in some things from my businesses as well as Self-Reliance Festival. Self-Reliance Festival is behind us. I have had a week to catch up on stuff here, to get ready for the first frost, to sneak in some oral surgery just for fun. And we're like catching up on animals, getting ready for the food forest class. I'm finally able to go back to I like even put food preservation on hold during the couple last weeks before Self-Reliance Festival. So to catch up on some of that stuff. And it feels good. I came off of Self-Reliance Festival so excited for a couple of reasons. One, people made real relationships. It happens every time. Some guy came up to me. He's like, Nicole, I just moved here from Washington State, and I sympathize because I used to live near Washington State. And I live in this part of Tennessee, and I don't know anybody. There's nobody there like me. Do you know how I can maybe like start a network so we have connections? And at that very moment, Mary walks by, who lives 30 minutes from this person. And I've met Mary. She's the person who did Homesteader Boot Camp here this year. And I'm like, Mary, come here. How far do you live from this person? They realized it was about half an hour apart. I was like, that is the beginning of your local network. That is why we come to these events. You don't even realize who's near you. But I saw that happen time after time after time where I'd be like, who feels alone? People raise their hand. Where are you from? Who else from here is from there? Raise your hand. And they would connect. And it would happen again and again and again. People go on to the Self-Reliance Festival Telegram and the same thing happens. And the bigger we get and the more support we have, the better we are. So I was really excited to see that happen yet again at a Self-Reliance Festival. I was excited to see people realize fear, living in a state of fear, being in a state of fear is not helping you move forward. And even though there are lots of things to fear, there have always been lots of things to fear. Right now, we're more aware of them. But there was always some crazy guy who might attack you and kill you that you had no idea was crazy near you, right? It's just now we're like, whoa, they're doing stuff in the world that's pretty scary looking. And last time it was scary, people died. And you know what? I got news for you. Last time it happened that we can think of, people died. Between that time and this time, it has happened in a lot of countries throughout the world that people have died when the authoritarian control freaks get too much power. And that's a hard reality of our world. And it's not comfortable. But the more free we are and the more supportive of each other and the more networked we are, the stronger we are when that stuff happens. The more likely we are to survive, the more resilient we are, the more things we know how to do, the better we are at troubleshooting when things get complicated. And the more open our minds are to solve problems and the less grounded in fear we are, the better we are. And that is why Self-Reliance Festival even exists. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. I think about it's behind us. It was the smoothest one we've had. It did make a profit for the first time. We helped a bunch of people. We had a bunch of people help us. We added music and a creative element, and that was really fun for people. But I think about why did we start Self-Reliance Festival? It's because all this shutdown stuff happened. John Willis and I had become friends. I went to a party at his place, and he was like, I spent the whole time showing people how I'm raising animals, my aquaponics systems, like all of these grow systems I have. Maybe we should do something for these people who want to learn this stuff, Nicole. And he offered originally to pay me a fee to run events for him. And I walked away from that completely overwhelmed because I was overcommitted in my life because I was doing websites and marketing advising and Hollow Roast Coffee and the Living Free in Tennessee podcast and my own events, right? Thanks, Pip and Eyes, for congratulating us for being in the black. Woohoo! And I thought, how can I add this other event at a location that has no event infrastructure? There's no showers, there's no toilets. Like we can bring in porta potties. Where are we going to do it? Are we just going to be outside and get rained on? Like I went away and I thought about it for 2 months. Like he didn't bring it up again. I didn't talk about it. I thought about it. I came back out there. I looked around. I left again. I don't even know if he knew why I was looking around. And I was like, yeah, let's do something. Here's what I propose. And it was like September. It was late August, early September. On this date, October, we'll put a call out. I think we were already starting to do live streams, but if not, we started to do live streams shortly after that. Let's ask everybody from the network, what do you have that you can do? And have them fill out a form. I'll charge $25. I have no idea what to charge, but I know it's going to cost some money to do this. I've got a little portable PA system, and we'll do things in the garage, and whatever happens, happens. Maybe somebody will show up and bring food, and we'll just see. It'll just be, John's like, I'll bring in a food truck and some porta potties. I was like, what do you want me to pay you for using your facility? He was like, nothing. I was like, well, I think if this is going to be viable, we need to make money from the event rather than you pay me to do this party. And he's like, okay, cool. And so it's like, I'm willing to put skin in the game. My skin was mostly time. And we put it out, and we had 150 people show up, and we had sessions in the pole barn and in the garage the whole time, simultaneous. People had a great time, and they showed each other how to do stuff. And we had people speak about stuff. And at the end of it, I was like, well, this went pretty well. We didn't have enough food for people to buy, so that's a bummer. And I can't remember if we allowed camping that time or not. We may have. We probably did, that's a stretch for John because he's letting people stay on his property, and that's a security breach, by the way, right? But it went well. And at the end of it, I lost money. And John lost money because John paid for things that he did not get reimbursed for. And at that time, I was trying to split money with speakers. So I paid speakers what I thought the profit was, but then bills came in afterwards. And that was pretty cool. And I thought, okay, well, let's think about the vision of this. Let's do another one. We decided February because we're crazy and, it might snow, but whatever. I was like, well, let's really think at what this event is for. And I was like, okay, it's to bridge the gap between prepper mindset that's more like tactically defense focused and homesteaders who are less that way, but are all about building food, cross-pollinate each other's knowledge so that we're all stronger together. This is a big network that we can develop. And I got really excited. It's about mastering new skills. It's about removing barriers and roadblocks that people think they have, they're mental, in their heads, to take control and ownership for their lives, whether that means starting a business or not, right? Like it says, I love all the connections being made through LFTN, SRF, and TSP. Exactly. And it's about becoming a functioning counter economy, an underground network, increasing personal resilience. That's what it's about. And so we went into February with that mindset, and we got some interest from people who were bigger names. And we had 300 people at that one. And we didn't have the big event tent yet. And John Witherspoon came out and he roasted a pig, and I was like, he was just going to give it away. I'm like, hey, sell it. It's your time. You should totally sell it. And so he and Andy did food, or I don't know how to, no, he and Melissa did food. And for the first time we had food at the event. It wasn't enough, but we had enough. At this point, we were still able to park everybody on the SOE compound. And we had sessions going on in, I think it was just garage sessions that second time. There may have been some pole barn stuff too. I can't remember. I think there was both. And there were demos, like more people were coming to demo. And that time, for the first time, a sponsor said, hey, I'll sponsor a meal. And so we had meal tickets for the pigs so that John got paid and Melissa got paid, and they sponsored the meal and brought in some drinks. And that was our first sponsor. And that was the Bergen County Harley Davidson, who's been with us ever since. They've been a huge supporter of of the Self-Reliance Festival. And people realized, hey, I can do vending stuff. So we added vending, but we didn't charge for vending. John Willis is like, Nicole, we probably need to charge for vending. And to do it right, we need help getting vending done right. It costs money. And so I was like, yeah, you're right. We should probably charge for the tables and the tents. And then we went back after that. We were like, I guess we'll do it again. People really made a difference. And so I was like, well, let's do it. And we started talking about the vision for Self-Reliance the third time. Oh, by the way, that one lost money too. And the price had gone up. And I was doing this early bird and then the price goes up thing, which we may do again next year. I don't know. We're just, putting it up. Yeah. Chuck says it was just the garage last time with a couple demos outside. Yeah. Because we have like this really cool, distilling for fuel thing that happens every time. And the blacksmith is there and he does really cool stuff too. Then those got to be outside. It's got to be outside. We had a beer making one, I think, the second in February. So then the third one happened and I'm like, this is going to pop. It's going to be in June. It's going to be great. And we started being more methodical about marketing. Billy Bond decided he'd come out and I thought, well, let's do a pig processing class before. Then we got a pig from John Witherspoon. And for the first time that I know about, we actually dispatched the pig as part of the class, which I've always done, but we've just done it small scale in our house. Billy showed us how to cut up the pig. He did a great job. We had the big event tent because I realized we're going to have like 500 people this time. And that one went really well. We had simultaneous sessions, garage and tent. And this has become like important to the event to have two areas because 500 people don't fit all in one area. And Jack Spirko reached out. He's like, hey, can I speak at your event? And I was like, yeah. So that brought people in. Right before the event, John Bush said, hey, can I just live stream it? And it's free, but I get to use the video afterwards. I was like, sure. So it like went up a level and we had Bear Independent. We had Jack Spirko. We had Billy Bond. And the cool thing is those guys all got together and started talking. And that network started cross-populating. So we both had like the personality networks cross-populating and even more connections. And oh yeah, we had rabbit processing in February. That was cool. Yeah, we didn't process anything this time. We'll probably process again next time. We'll see. Because that's something I learned from this event. And it did great. But I'll tell you what, Mama Sauce and I were wiped after that. And it was not as smooth logistically as it could have been. Like vendors showed up and we didn't know exactly where to tell them to go. And we learned a lot of hard lessons on that one. And I got out of that one. We'd done a giveaway with EMP Shield and some other people. And I was like, that made the difference between breaking even and not breaking even, except for then expenses came in afterwards. I didn't really realize. And we lost money on that one too. The whole time, John Willis has been paying for the porta potties and not charging me for them. And I know he was paying his employees on site and not charging me for it. And I hadn't paid Mama Sauce or me a cent. I didn't pay any volunteer staff either. So the whole time it's been a lot of investment from a lot of people. And then I was like, okay, we got to break out in October. I'm like, what can we do? And some of the, like we had Grumpy came down, Grumpy Acres, who's on here, and Data from EMP Shield. And they reached out to me and they're like, here's something we do at our events. So like Data gave me this whole thing. It's like, when we do the giveaway, we make a bigger deal out of it. It actually brings money in and it's super helpful to the event. And I was like, we're going to do that next time. But unfortunately, we scheduled our next one right on top of their event. So I was really glad that Tag was able to make time to come down. Billy was there again. Jack Spirko came again because his buddy David wanted to come out. Jack won't be at every one, guys. We already know this. Bear was unable to come this time, but that was okay because having different speakers through made sense. And we had Joel Riles in with his dogs for a second time, did a much bigger demo this time. We had the grist mill come in. We had a sawmill in. Of course, we had the forage was here and distilling for fuel. And we had a spinning and weaving demo in. This time, for the first time, a food truck came in because we tried to get food trucks before. They would say $2,500 guaranteed minimum and we'll come in. And then they would no-show us. So I was just like, forget it. Food vendors got to pay if they're going to come in. And if not, we're sending them to Big Daddy's at the entrance, which has a lot of good food and it's beneficial to the neighborhood. And I was over it. This time we had a food truck came in. He did well. Andy did well. Big Daddy's did well. We actually had food covered for the event this time for the first time. It was great. And most importantly, we are able to stick to bridging that gap between prepper and homesteader, mastering new skills, removing barriers and roadblocks that the attendees come in. Because a lot of attendees who come, I would say half of our attendees, maybe 40%, are coming in having barely made the $75 to pay for their ticket, feeling afraid, not sure what to do, feeling alone. And they walk out with a new mindset, empowered to go take control of their lives. And the next time they come back, that $75 wasn't a problem. So by taking control of their lives, the financial piece starts coming together for them. And so we have this combination of people who are already on that financial path and people who are wanting to start it and have taken that leap of faith to get there, to do it. And that's something that I've been sort of watching happen at this event the whole time. This last one, it was very stark. You could really see that was happening. So one of the things about Self-Reliance Festival, as related to my last 6 years, is that I, in order to do Self-Reliance Festival, had to give up one of my business units. And I knew that because this year, Self-Reliance Festival was 50% of my time in my businesses, 50% for the 2 events. So I'm not counting February, I'm counting June, because I don't know for February. But I know for June and for October, it was 4 months of time. And the only reason I was able to run my other businesses is I had to give something up, A, and B, Mama Sauce, because she wasn't billing me for her time. So that's 6 months for 2 events. And what that means for me financially is if Self-Reliance Festival does not make a profit and I'm not able to charge some money for my time, I can't do that, right? I can't justify that. And what I gave up to be able to do that was website development and marketing consulting, which I always knew I wanted to give that up. Like when people come to me for a website, I work with them with some of my partners who are really good, hand it off to them and they go. The Liberty Lab, the guy who did the Self-Reliance Festival website, is working with somebody else who was like, Nicole, I want to work with you. I'm like, hey, I can help you with your marketing strategy, like your strategy statement. And then you work with Scott and he'll build your website and it'll actually get done, because if you hire me to build your website right now, I'm not going to get it done. Right. And I have that with another person who comes to me for websites. I'm like, we got to work with partners or it's not going to get done, because I will get sucked off into Self-Reliance Festival or some of these other things. For me though, guys, from a lifestyle design standpoint, I would rather be doing Self-Reliance Festival. I would rather invest my time in something that helps people become independent and furthers freedom than necessarily just building a marketing strategy for coffee or for soaps or for whatever it is. I'm good at it. I like doing that. I don't hate doing that, but this is my passion, right? Is getting people together, getting the networks going. I am a connector. That's what I do. That's why when you tell me I need somebody, I want to meet somebody near me, I've actually remembered. I may not remember the person's name, but I'm like, that person lives near you and you two need to talk. That's one of my secret sauces. I have a friend, Chef Brett. He's like, every time you tell me to go somewhere, if I can go, I go, because I know that's what's happening, is there's somebody there I need to meet. I'm like, yeah, that's how my brain works. I'm a connector. And I am a catalyst. So I spark new things. But that often means that there's no profit in that. Well, having a venue through Self-Reliance Festival and through my other events where that starts happening and I can pay my bills is like marrying my passion with helping the world. But I had to get rid of that other business unit, which means that was 40% of my income this year is gone. What was going to be 40%. And then I invested in Self-Reliance Festival. And this transition for me is very exciting, right? I'm excited about it. It's furthering my passion. It's helping the world. And we can all move forward. And you guys can watch it happen, right? You can watch it happen. So that's my personal involvement in Self-Reliance Festival and where I'm hoping it will go next year. Hello, Spags. Welcome to the live. Spags is on. I was just talking about you and your advice on the giveaway for Self-Reliance Festival after the June event. So here's how it kind of broke down. So the good about Self-Reliance Festival. So we did not have 500 people. I thought we had 500 people at this one. We had 440 people at final head count. Of that, we had 30 speakers and 28 vendors, which if you compare it to June, where we had, I think, fewer vendors, that's progress. And we had that food truck come in, and we had 2 food vendors, and that was pretty darn cool because everybody got to eat. Celebrate the connections, says K-Bonk. Easy access to good food. I think this event, for the first time, food was not a cluster. Like our food vendor, Andy, who's been coming for several times, got stuff done for us to show people that food can be possible, right? And he worked his butt off, but he's, one guy and a couple helpers, and you can only serve so many people in that way out of a tent. And he did a great job last time. He did a great job this time. Adding the pretzels and the other things that got added this time gave a lot more variety, and it moved more people through. And I think people saw that who could be food vendors, and they're like, oh, now I see. Because not everybody wanted to come and camp and have sandwiches, right? Or cook on their camp stoves. Some people would just rather buy a burrito or, a pulled pork sandwich or whatever. And so seeing that it was astounding to me that it took 4 events for people to realize there's a market opportunity here to sell food to hungry people. Hungry people will spend money on food. Hungry people will kill for food. But, not at Self-Reliance Festival. That's not what we're about. Anyway, that was really great to see. The addition of showers to the camping area was awesome, and the hand washing station, and we just had better infrastructure this time. So we knew from last time the flow of the tent where it was through vendor row to the garage sessions and then having food back there. It ends up in a circle where people walk through the vendors. They walk through the factory where the table vendors are, and it's a circle, and that worked really well. And that means no parking in there, right? And then we put the things that would be messy on the parking lot, like the sawmill and the grist mill, behind the fence. So that went down into the land, and, it composts and becomes part of the fertility of the land. That all worked really well. We knew the AV was what it needed to be. And we thought more about how do we get people water, coffee, food, hand washing. We moved the bathrooms to 3 locations instead of 2 so that could all work. And it worked great. I think that setup is what we have next time as well. And I think it worked really well. The bringing your own chair thing worked well. We communicated that better, so more people had chairs. There may be a vendor who wants to rent chairs next time. Somebody reached out to me about that. It's fine by me. There's people flying in who don't want to bring their chairs and who want to sit down. And so that's cool. I know that I can rent chairs for the event, but then we run the risk of breaking chairs, and we got to move the chairs. It's a lot more logistics. And if everybody brings their own and leaves with it or rents it, and there's somebody in charge of that, way easier from a logistics standpoint. That means less staff. We raised over $1,700 for the Dark Horse Lodge, which is a veterans retreat for combat veterans to heal. And that's something that my network has raised money for a long time, ever since Kurt Duggar reached out to me, introduced me to Dark Horse Lodge. Tactical was just getting out of the military at that time, and his transition out of the military as a combat vet was rough. And I'm not sure he would have made it had there not been a support system for him, and the VA was not that support system, but our network was, and the Dark Horse Lodge was, and they're already having gatherings there. We added music and fun. I think nobody realized I could sing really until they saw me sing, and they were like, "Oh, we didn't know you had that in you." Yep. Those songs on my podcast are mine. And I got to play with some people who were kind enough to learn my songs a couple of weeks in advance. Then they performed, and then Testimona performed, and everybody who stayed for the music seemed to have a really good time. This is also something that we're going to improve for next time, right? We're going to add visual art to this. I've got somebody who wants to do a painting thing. Why would we do that at a prepper fest though? Like, Nicole, what's up? Because we're becoming a counter economy. We're becoming an underground network, and there's more to life than prepping. There's more to life than prepping. Tapping into that creative part of your nature helps you problem solve later, helps you learn to let go of things, helps you deal with things emotionally, and your mental health in a urgent situation is as important as how prepared are you, right? How prepared are you? And that's something that is going to be different about this festival than other festivals. I acknowledge the crossover between creative and liberty. And if you look at how the propaganda campaign has developed over the last 20 years for the big state people, they have brought big state concepts into art, into entertainment, and they dominate there. And that's ridiculous because it doesn't have to be that way. There's a lot of people who are freedom-minded, who are also creative, artistic, and all of these other things. Technical, all of it. We need to do that. We need to embrace that. We need to be okay with it. And I understand we're like pragmatic. If you don't have enough food stored and you're starving, do you really care about painting and music? Maybe not. But can the painting and music help you get over that mind thing? Then, yeah, that's it. Porterhouse and Teal says, it's a great event. So glad I made it. 4,540-mile round trip to SOE and back. That's right. Worth the trip. Connections were made. This is the most important part of the event. Connections were made again and again and again. There was a Freedom Cell meetup for statewide Tennessee Freedom Cell. But I saw time and time again, people just accidentally meeting the person they need to meet to get rid of a barrier. And every time I come back from this event, I'm like, I have a barrier. Like, one of my barriers that I finally got rid of is I write rock and roll songs and I record them, and they are not for sale except for one song. And the reason that one song is for sale is I spent time learning how to figure out how to distribute the stupid thing myself. And it's sold. I've sold some. So I have royalties coming off of that. Not much, but And I realized the reason the rest of my songs aren't for sale is that I haven't figured out how to get that time into the rest of the songs that I already have recorded. Blink, 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 blink. And I realized that I have outsource options. I can pay somebody to just do it for me, and then it's done, and I don't have to mess with it. And what's been keeping me is time. And I don't have a lot of time because I'm doing Self-Reliance Festival and the coffee and the podcast and the events here. So I know I could pay for them, and then hopefully they'll pay for themselves. And if not, it all helps promote each other, right? So that's those kind of little mind blocks can really get in your way, guys. And that's what goes away when these connections are made. And it's really interesting. We also found somebody who loves spreadsheets to work on our team on this event, which is really going to help with some of the time investment that Mama Sauce and I put in. But we pay her. We do pay her. Way better flow. Like communications with the speakers, with the vendors, with the event, with the attendees, the whole thing flowed better. When vendors got there, we actually knew what space they needed to go to and where they could go. We had policies for what can happen and if you can move, how you can move, that sort of thing. The whole event flow was better. It will be better next time because we learned from it. And it made a profit, I think, because I don't know how much John Willis has into it. I'm going to talk to him about that this week. But, I mean, making a profit ain't bad, guys. It's good. Okay, here's the bad. Some of the things that are good are also bad. The pre-event communications needs to be steadier, faster, and all of that. So one of the failings I see is that we don't have our agenda really together until close to the end of the event, which means speakers don't know when they're speaking. I can fix that. We can do that better by having a better idea of who's speaking faster. And what this means is if you are going to put an application in to speak, you better get on it when I release it because it's going to end up being no's to people who wait till the last minute. And somebody asked if any marriages have come out of Self-Reliance Festival yet. Yes, I don't know who, but I know that. I think the communications needs to be steadier and faster. That's why we started a Self-Reliance Festival YouTube channel that I will actually put some time and thought into what that schedule looks like. Doing the weekly live stream before the event to take questions really helped. Having more clarity on camping time and policy and all of that will help. And we do have that now. But I really want to see that when somebody puts an application in to speak, they know yes or no within a reasonable amount of time. And then we can start saying, these are the policies for what you get if you're a speaker, right? And that's important. Ticket sales were way harder for October. People just weren't ready to buy for whatever reason. And as I said, there were about 50 fewer people this time than last time. But I will take responsibility for, I could have marketed it more appropriately earlier on. This is a place where we will improve this time. I may outsource some marketing stuff. I'm going to talk to a couple people who have impressed me. But I feel like we should have had more ticket sales sooner. We should have had more resources for people who wanted to help us market the event. And I still got right up to the event and people hadn't heard about it yet. And I'm like, how could you not hear about it? Like, you listen to all 7 of us who are like really pushing this hard. So that's something where we'll work on that. And I'm not closed to the fact that maybe ticket sales are harder because of the price. I don't know. $75 is pretty cheap for something like this. Although I see like there is an expo that's charging $10 for a Self-Reliance expo at the end of this month for one day. But I think that they make most of their money on expensive booth sales. And our booths are pretty reasonable. And I think we can also, I think the keeping this event liquid part of it is going to revolve around sponsors and those sorts of things long term, and other on-site things rather than ticket sales. We did an assessment of kinds of cars in the parking lot and stuff like that, just to see like where are people coming from. And that's where I get that 40% number of people who made a leap of faith to get there because they want to make their lives better. Well, if we go up to $150, which is what the ticket should cost based on what I'm seeing expense-wise, we're going to cut people out. And I mean, I don't know for sure because I have people I collaborate with on this, but I don't want to do that. I want to still have that entry as possible to the event. And you can make it happen if you really want to make it happen. And you can camp on site and you can, that doesn't cost money to bring your tent, that sort of thing. The event coordination team was understaffed. That's part of why communications was so hard. We also had really awkward scheduled other events that we wanted to cross promote, right? Spags is one of them. And Back to the Land Festival was another one. And trying to explain to people why you should go to all of the events, which not everybody can take that much time off or do it, was hard. It was hard. It was like I had marketing confusion of when I'm pushing something, what I'm pushing. So some people went to Back to the Land who may have wanted to go to SRF, and some people went to SRF who may have wanted to go to Back to the Land, right? And all of these events are great. And what we can all do better who coordinate these events is space them out, I think, so that we can do a better job of people who do want to go to them all but can't just be gone for 2 weeks straight. Go to them all, right? And those who can't, but I think it's important with other partners in this space who are doing great things that I can spend more time cross-promoting their stuff because their stuff is good. And if you're going to expand your network, sometimes that means it's not just the same place every time. It means go to some different places, meet some different people. And the event coordination staff was understaffed. That meant trade-offs in my personal business. Am I ready for Christmas rush at Holler Roast? No. Have I ordered the mugs that I'm packaging with the coffee for Christmas? No. Is that going to get done this week? Yes. And I knew I could put it off a little bit longer, but usually I have like the photographs up on site by now. So that's actually hurting my business that I had to make that trade-off because I would already be selling those right now if they were up there. And I just flat didn't have time, and Mama Sauce didn't have time, and I didn't have somebody I could trust to outsource that to. And I know what I want, but I don't know what it looks like. And until I know what it looks like, it's hard for me to sell that. So that's a thing, right? That is a huge thing. Yeah. Arts by Lee Murphy says most of arts and crafts festivals live or die depending on the number and quality and competence of volunteers. If we didn't have volunteers at SRF, we would have been screwed. We had people come in who I didn't even know were coming, help us set up. And that setup crew was really helpful because Tactical couldn't be there, he's usually there, because we had some stuff happen on our homestead. And then another person who was volunteering to set up had something happen on their homestead, and they weren't there, but other people were. And I was very, very thankful for it. Yeah, somebody says 150 would be reasonable. I really hope we can keep it at 75. We're talking to partners about that this week. But I really hope we can keep that cost. I mean, I shouldn't hope that. I should just want to make more money, right? But man, if we can keep it at 75, that'll be awesome. That will be awesome. We had more speaker churn than I've had at any event, and I've coordinated some larger scale 1,000-person libertarian big name events. And, you know, people get sick, people's flights get canceled. That all happens. I had speaker churn this time. I got an after action report from somebody, and they were like, they were impressed with how gracefully we handled the speaker churn. Inside, I was dying. I was literally like, there was a lot of because I got no showed. And some, you know, and people had valid reasons. People had less valid reasons. That was just very, very not fun. And that informs my decisions for speakers next time, guys, because people who show up where they say they're going to show up are a higher priority for me to invest in, because I'm laying our reputation on the line. And if somebody who is a draw doesn't show up, then people are disappointed because they bought their ticket to see that person, right? And so that's important. And I think there's always going to be a little bit of that. Like, if you get the flu, you should totally not come speak and get everybody else sick. If a hurricane keeps you at home and you can't leave Florida, you should probably not drive through that weather, right, to get here. But at the end of the day, I know what I put in to get to events when I have problems come up. And this year, like for Rogue Food Conference, I had a big problem come up the day before, and I still got there. I got there later than I expected, but I got there on time. I drove when I wasn't planning to drove, but I got there on time. And it cost me $800 more than I expected to spend on that event, but I got there on time, right? And I think it's important as a speaker, when you commit, you do the best you can, and you forgive yourself if you have a health condition that kept you from coming, right? Or whatever it is. We're going to have more vendors next time. We're going to have fewer table vendors. So if we sold out of tables this time, we'll sell out again. There is limited space for that inside. The only way we can add table vendors is to put them outside. And right now, I don't think we're going to do a second tent with table vendors unless I see a lot more interest. And then that means less parking on site, right? So that's definitely a thing. Yeah, Michael Sparks says, I can help out next time. I'm only an hour away. Michael, I will take you up on that. I'm not going to star it, but yeah. Lee says, that's what I got to see. Yeah, see, I made it there. I almost didn't make it there, Lee, but I was like, if I have to fly, I'm getting there. I just don't know that I'll have my coffee earned, but we just rented a really expensive car instead. My car broke. That's what happened. And I think more vendors, we had feedback back that more vendors in the off-grid space and the self-reliance space would be good. So I'm going to have to actively reach out to those. I need a list of people that we think should be there. And I think it's a very good audience for that, because like Hack My Solar really helped me come up with a big picture plan for my property, which is not off-grid, to reduce my reliance on the grid, right? I'm not going off-grid, but I can do things that mean using less power. And for me, it's power, because I have my own water, I have my own septic, but power. And if I do that, then I still have access to the power. But if for some reason there's problems with the power, we're better off. Like I'm about to be able to wash my hands without turning on a generator or just doing it out of a bucket after this month. And that's super exciting to me if the power goes out, because formerly I could not. I mean, I have a bucket I leave here, and I have ways of storing water that I can, right? But it's going to be really great to be able to turn on the faucet, and it will not be high pressure, but there will be some water to wash my hands that drains down the drain. It'll be like, and I can flush a toilet. Now I have outhouses. It's okay. Like, there's lots of different ways, right? So having somebody help you logically assess that, and having vendors that show you these things can help you get there, I think will be really helpful at the event next year. And I don't know what that looks like, but we'll see. And then definitely better marketing needed. So just sales and marketing in general is when I'm deep in the coordination, I'm not doing the marketing as I should. And that is somewhere where if you're not consistent and people don't hear the message 7 times or more, they forget that it's happening. And then like, oh my gosh, that's next week. Never mind. I have something else scheduled. And I think we can reach a lot more people and bring more people into the underground network. For me, it's important we target the right kind of person, which means a lot of relationship selling, I think, from partners. But I'm open to other opportunities. I think it's important to keep this in the network, so to speak. We expand our network, but we keep it in the network. And I don't mean like-minded politically, but just people who prioritize freedom and people and making ourselves better and empowerment rather than unhealthy vampiric relationships with each other or taking. And that's like a weird balance to strike, but it is what it is. And I'd never want somebody to come to the event who's uncomfortable. It was really funny because at this event, I started out on day one with, there are liberals among us. And there were people who share our values. Many of us are conservative, right? But share our values and they're liberal. They may have they may have voted for Joe Biden. Can you get along with that person? Yes, you can. Because like one of them came up to me after and said, I just wanted to yell out, we want guns too. And I was like, sometimes we overinflate our differences and they're not as big as we think they are. And when we can align around priorities like mastering new skills, developing this underground network, getting more resilience in our lives, supporting your right to self-defense, like all of these things, I'm not sure I care who you voted for. I actually, probably because I don't see that your vote really mattered, I care less than other people might. Some people really care about that. But if you do care about that, ask yourself why. And ask yourself, how much difference did that one vote make? Because I know in Tennessee, if you voted for Joe Biden, your vote meant 0, right? So like look at how the statistics work and look at how the system's set up and see how much you really can influence it based on who's in office. Because, I mean, look at how much influence people who were in office who you thought would change things had. They didn't. And that's a hard truth and it's not fun to think about, but it's our system. And it's why we do what we do here, right? That's why we do what we do here. Okay, so the ugly. We had some personality tensions happen, and I don't know where that's going to go, and we'll deal with it. And that's as much as I will say on that. We also got so big that I am no longer aware exactly everybody who I need to thank. So a lot of you here listening to this are people I should have thanked personally, and I haven't, and I feel like crap about that. I've tried to thank as many people as possible. I've tried to mention names. I mentioned names from stage. I usually write handwritten notes. Those haven't been done for the last 2 events. They will be done again next time. But I don't know who all helped. And that's really uncomfortable for me. And I really want that fixed for next time. In order to do that, I have to have enough time to see. And I may not have enough time to see, but what I can do is ask other people who work on the event to help me keep track of who to thank. Because if we're not thankful for everything that's being put into this, then we lose an important part of our event, which is that the community's doing it too. It's not just Nicole Sauce and Mama Sauce and a team of people. It's everybody. Everybody who picked up a piece of garbage that wasn't theirs. Everybody who pitched in to set up the VIP dinner when they weren't even necessarily going to be at it. Everybody who sat around and sang Country Roads with me from the stage. Everybody who was kind to the people at registration when their name wasn't on there because we made a database mistake. Like all of that. People who set up tables, moved tables, loaded my car, unloaded my car, reloaded my car. Went and ran and got water for the coffee when they didn't know where the water bucket was because it was behind the tent hiding. Ran in and fixed AV things. I did a session with no warning because we had speaker churn. I don't know who everybody is. Set up, tear down, clean the bathroom wall. Like, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And I feel bad that I don't know who all of you are right now. And I hope that we have that fixed by next time. That was the ugly. Let's talk about the money. I got to pay some people who helped for the first time, and that felt good. John Willis got money for the porta potties this time. That felt good. And while all the expenses are not in yet, there is profit on this event. It doesn't account for the last 3 years, 3 events losses. It doesn't account for everything John or I have invested. And Mama Sauce and I have not been paid this year at all. But I now have a number that I can talk about with John and say, what are we doing with this? How do we want to make that up? How do we move forward? And this time, I was very purposeful about tracking hours of volunteers that I like, the key volunteers, like the vendor coordinator and the volunteer coordinator, like how much time did they put in, both before, during, and after. I kept track of my hours. I kept track of Tactical's hours. I kept track of Nighthawk's hours. Nighthawk makes his money on the parking fees that he splits with the people who help him and the gas station. So that's all its own little thing, right? We wrote that down this time so that we know if we had done this as a contract, what would we have charged? And the profit doesn't cover that, but it's profit. And that tells us that the event is meeting a need because people are willing to come and invest their time and their dollars in it. And it also means that next year, I think I can transition and keep not doing websites and marketing and keep doing this event. So for me, that was really cool. And the amount of profit, because I'm not going to hide the numbers, is about $15,000. So that's what I'm looking at talking to John about, John Willis, this week, just to see that. And the amount of time invested on my crew side is about $40,000 for this event at a reasonable rate. So, it doesn't cover that, but it's something. And after only a year of working really hard on this and investing everything we could back into it, I'm proud of that. I am proud of that number. And I'm excited about what could happen next year. A year ago, this was a small little event in the garage and the pole barn at Special Operations Equipment with a handful of people. We are a little more than 4 times the size we were then. We're achieving what we need to achieve as far as relationships go, new business relationships, friendships. We added virtual attendance. We have creative participation. And the most important part, guys, is how many people have gone from a fear response to a proactive take care of your life response. That is why I do it. That is why Mama Sauce does it. I don't know if that's why John Willis does it, but I suspect that's part of why he does it as well. And everybody who has partnered with us to help us do that, I am grateful that we have this, because the fewer of us who are in fear when times get tough, the better off we all are, the better off the network is, and the less likely we are as a society to go places where none of us want to see the society go. So I am thankful for all the help on this event, for the sponsors, for having faith in us, for the participants, for all my secret helpers who I don't even know who you are, for everybody who's presented and not charged me money for it. Because part of the other thing that's not paid at this point is no presenter got paid, right? And we may need to change that. Like if we want Joel Salatin, we're gonna have to pay for him. He may give me a deal. I don't know. He probably won't though, because he needs to make a certain amount of money every year. And it would be fair to have standards for what we are paying presenters who come in and invest their time and their travel and all of that. So I am thankful mostly though for the progress and excited about next year's Self-Reliance Festival. Right now, what we're looking at doing is March, I think it's 25 and 26. It's a weekend, Saturday, Sunday. So if I just said Friday, Saturday, and then October 15 and 16, 2 events, not 4. But what I really want to do, Spags, is work with y'all to develop some sort of a passport premium alum gathering in the summer where we can maybe go do some shooting or kayaking or something more involved with access to air conditioning, because summers are hot. And so a little bit more expensive. We may be staying in cabins instead of camping. I don't know, like something that's alum only or passport only. And it's a way to, it's really focused less on big speakers and more focused on this is the network. This is the network accelerating each other. This is us working together to move everybody forward and to really grow as people, as business people, and as a network. So that's my thoughts, guys. Thanks for listening to the show today. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 3 today. 1, get your Food Forest ticket if you haven't, because I'm stopping sales on those at the end of this week. That's at livingfreeintennessee.com. The link is actually in the comments of the YouTube too, if you want the direct link to the event. But it's at livingfreeintennessee.com on the right side, or scroll down a little bit if you are on a cell phone. Get your coffee at Holler Roast. We will have the holiday offerings out really soon. Mama Sauce and I got to spend an hour on the phone arguing about coffee mugs. Or consider becoming a member. That's all over at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. Okay, I'm giving you that break just so I can do my audio editing. I don't have a lot of questions. If you have questions, guys on the live feed who are still there, all 37 of you, put the first few words in all caps. I'm happy to continue answering questions. That was the audio podcast we just recorded, so I don't always work the questions in on that. I have one from Andrea Snow here that says, this is what we are wanting to do as well. Is your event planning class in the community? Okay, so what I have right now, and I'm probably going to do another event, sort of more like workshop type thing, probably a digital workshop on event planning or setting up events and getting events going. I may, Spags, reach out to you and see if you want to do something together, because you guys have done a lot on events in spaces I have not. I think we could really put together a good 1 or 2 day virtual webinar. I think it's 4 or 5 lessons learned from event coordination on my membership portal that comes with membership at Living Free in Tennessee. I can sell it separately to Andrea if you want to reach out. But if you're already a member, it's in there. The link is on the video page in the membership portal. And what I think is important is that I'm pretty rabidly transparent about stuff. That's why I was willing to share the amount of profit. Like Holler Roast Coffee is making $40,000 profit every year-ish, not counting employment time. So that's actually an employment amount, right? And if I was doing that full time, I would be earning $40,000. However, I'm paying Michelle to help run the business, right? And so that means I'm not making $40,000 off of it. In fact, so this year I went into the year having made under $20,000 for the last 6 years. And I went to a friend of mine who's really good at making money. And I'm like, dude, okay, so I've got this. My businesses are successful in the scale that we deliver what we promise. We have decent customer service. I'm not losing money on them. But I would like to be making more money so that I can retire someday. And that, I don't max out my retirement every year right now. Right. I'm barely making it on the health insurance costs and all that. It's not really insurance. I have a health share, which is cheaper. And I'm thankful that my health is good, but from a how I want my financial world to be standpoint, I need to do better at that. And you need to find people who are successful in the things you want to learn and talk to them. So John Willis has I don't know if he does it strategically or just instinctually, he has been a mentor for me on achieving more, on getting better, on no excuses, and yes, on accepting that making a profit is good. I've always thought making a profit's good, but I'm always so fast to give up personal financial well-being to help other people. That's what I do. And so I talked to a friend last year and I was like, I need to be better at this. And he said, well, okay. And he didn't say anything. About 2 weeks later, he calls me when he's driving somewhere and he starts asking me really hard questions about money. And he thought he was pissing me off. And because he'd ask me a question and there'd be silence. And the reason there was silence is I'm number dyslexic. And so when you ask me a number, I'm like, I think this is the number, but my number might be wrong. Or I need to do some math and I need to look at a spreadsheet or get a calculator out to double check myself, because if I just tell you a number, it'll be close, but it won't be the number. it'll be the number that I think it is. And some numbers may have reversed in there and it could be way off. So he thought he was pissing me off. I was super grateful. He proceeded to financially interrogate me about everything I did in 2021. And it was at the end of 21. So the preceding year, how much time I put into it, how much money I spent, how much money I made. And if my goal is $100,000 a year income, which is my near-term goal, that this is how much I had to make per day, and anything that didn't make that per day, I need to decide, can I make that much per day, or do I need to cut it? And that's part of why websites went away and marketing went away, because I wasn't. And I didn't love it. Like, there were lots of things. And that was really good for me. And I continue to go down that road right now. I don't know how much money I will have made. He challenged me to make $100,000 this year, and I don't think I did. But I think I made more than 20 this year. So we'll see where I got. And that's among my rentals, my Hollow Roast coffee, my podcast, any additional, like the Live Free Academy webinars I've done have made me some money. Most of that money is invested back into like video equipment to do better at webinars. Self-reliance festival, and my workshops I do here. And like, the Homestead meat stuff isn't making money this year. It just isn't. It's going to offset, like my groceries cost less because of that. So that was really eye-opening for me, and I still need to be better at that. And part of that is just having the cojones to say, this is how much this thing's going to cost. And I'm not good at that sometimes. And I'm admitting that to y'all because a lot of you are not good at that either. And you feel guilty for making money. And it's so stupid to feel guilty for making money, especially if you're providing value. Like, stealing money's bad, but making money's good. Okay, Margot says, fantastic podcast, ma'am. Can't wait to go to the Self-Reliance Festival. October day definitely doesn't work, but got to make March work. Yeah. I'm really hoping I don't screw myself over on my spring workshop, which is at the end of April, because I do Self-Reliance Festival. The other thing I don't know is if my events here are going to get negatively impacted, because that's a cheaper event, except for it probably costs you about the same when you factor in the food part and the amount of days that we do. But the one in March is 1 month from my April workshop. My April workshop's an important part of my income every year. And I work really hard on that event. And I'm scared because the Food Forest event is not sold out. And I've never not sold out an event except for the first year I ever did an event. So that's uncomfortable for me. But at the same time, I think the good we are accomplishing with Self-Reliance Festival and the potential for it just as a profit center is also worth investing in. Autumn says, just a suggestion, move the noisy machines away from the speaker tent so they can run demos without being a distraction. I wish we could. I don't have anywhere to put them, but we may next time have a better option. I'll talk to John about that. I knew when we put the sawmill there that I didn't want the sawmill there, but he had to be off absolutely level, could not be on the gravel because we didn't want the sawdust going into the gravel. And that was the only level spot. And it was like literally right behind the event tent, which was problematic because the sawmill demo was awesome, but you could only see it when speakers weren't speaking. I think Dawn, that we are going to change I'm going to make it so the garage sessions and the tent sessions, if we do simultaneous sessions again, are on the same schedule and have a little bit more space next time. Margot says, definitely plan on going to your spring workshop if we can get tickets before they sell out. Yeah, those usually sell out in one day, but like with the food forcing, I'm like, is that going to happen next time? This is like what really goes on in our heads when we're like, it's always sold out. In fact, I tend to accidentally oversell it if my ticket count isn't right. I figured out how to fix the ticket count thing though. Yeah, so I would love to hear feedback on Self-Reliance Festival from the attendee standpoint. The other thing I forgot to say today is the content. I missed the mark on what attendees were there for. And it was partially the people who canceled were my hands-on speakers, not my lifestyle speakers. So I had more lifestyle speakers than hands-on speakers. And that impacted the energy dramatically. So like the speaker churn thing really hurt from a content standpoint. And what I noticed is I need to make sure that we have like hard skills in the sessions more. I'm really thankful that Jack Spirko did his aquaculture presentation, and because that was hands-on and he's usually more lifestyle. And Toolman Tim brought a lot of practicality in how to market yourself online. But we had way too many esoteric sessions. And because of how the churn happened, I had it like esoteric practical on the agenda. And what happened on Sunday was like esoteric, because somebody didn't show up at their time. And luckily that person did show up later and was more practical. But that's something that for the next one, I'm going to be really conscious of and really picky about who's doing my hands-on stuff, because the hands-on stuff is a big part of why people come. And the motivational stuff helps people with those roadblocks they don't know they have. So they don't know they want it, but they do want it. But if we do back to back motivational, that's also not good. And that was a big lesson to me about who I say yes to and how often I say yes. And that's a lesson I've been learning for many of you who listen to my podcast for a very long time. I don't like to say no to people, and I'm not always good about my boundaries, and I've gotten better about them. And no is a thing that's going to happen next year, because I think it's important from a success of the event standpoint that we have that balance between the esoteric, the motivational, and the hands-on. And I want to see more hands-on practical next year. So that'll be cool. Any other questions before we wrap it? Because I'm not seeing questions. No questions, no go. But I just have to vamp here for 30 seconds because there's like a 30-second delay between me asking that question and you typing your things and realizing we're about to hang up here. But I appreciate you guys making time this much. I mean, this was a longer podcast than usual because the debrief always takes so long. But I think it was worth doing. It took me a much longer time to internalize what was happening. Yeah, Margot says no is a full sentence. Yeah. So it's really funny is years ago, if somebody would say no to me, I didn't like it. And I would ask why, and I'd get really hurt feelings and blah, blah, blah. And now I think somebody overheard this. I think it was at the Swale workshop this summer. I needed Nighthawk to drive to do something. And it was Sunday. I needed him to go get my dogs from the kennel. And I'm like, and somebody overheard me do this. I go on Zelle, I go, hey, Nighthawk on direct private, can you go get my dogs? Here's the answer I got. No. And I still have like the initial response is like, what the F do you mean no for? But that's not really my response. And somebody else heard me and they like looked at me with these really wide eyes. And I was like, he has a good reason. And I'm not going to ask why, because I just got a very direct no. And he doesn't want to explain it right now. And that's fine. That means something's going on. And I'm just going to accept that no, because I trust Nighthawk. I know that if he could get my dogs, he would get my dogs. And it's fine. And I went on with my life. And it turned out the reason he said no is it was about 2:00 on a Sunday. He had decided to have a beer and he didn't trust himself to drive. Very good reason not to drive drunk to go get my dogs. Right. And I appreciated that. And that's something that I think we forget, because in our society, it's not necessarily acceptable to say no, but actually sometimes no is better. Something I am working on now. I read this thing. It basically said how you are hurting people when you don't mean to. And one of the ways you hurt people when you don't need to is you overcommit and then don't follow through, which means not saying no. And you don't clearly articulate no. And even though that hurts for a minute, sometimes longer term, that doesn't hurt. So I was really thankful. Like my choir fundraiser is in October. It's like in 2 weeks, October 21st. And it's a big effort. And I wish I wasn't doing it this time, but I agreed to do it. So I'm doing it. And I do their MC work. I help coordinate like the checkout for the auction items. I do a bunch of stuff. And somebody who I've always worked on it with said she'd do it this year. And she's also taking classes. And she has a paper due that weekend. And last week, she sent an email saying, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I have a paper due that weekend. I didn't realize how much time this was going to take. I'm not going to be able to help you with your choir fundraiser. She gave us 2 weeks notice. I'm sorry about this. I've been trying to get better about realizing how much time things take and my commitments are. And I wrote back to her, like, thanks for letting us know because we have time to get help between now and then. And if she had waited till the night before, that would be a problem. I was really proud of her for doing that because that's hard to do. But think about how much better that is to know 2 weeks in advance than day of no show, or day of shows up and is useless because frazzled, or day before found out. Now I wrote, and the other person who's working on me with the event was like, we were both like, thank you. Hope everything goes well. And I wrote to her in email. I said, what we need are 2 volunteers who can read spreadsheets. That's what I need. And that may mean that the choir members who would sing at the fundraiser are not singing. I'm a choir member who is not singing at the fundraiser because I'm busy doing other stuff. And she's like who? And I listed a couple names and we got our volunteers. We'll be fine. If that person had said no, I would have been like Thursday night screwed, scrambling around looking for somebody. So that's something, it's a lesson I need to learn too. I mean, I talk about balancing your commitments and things, but something I've traditionally been bad at is overcommitting and then getting it done anyway. And I have started saying no more to things. It's why I'm not also doing websites right now. So anyway, guys, I will see you on Wednesday. Hopefully we're with Paul Wheaton. If not, it'll be somebody else really fun. Make a great week.